Great. Thank you so much, Prabhu. My name is Melissa Balgley. I'm a program manager with Wilson. We are a talent solutions provider based in Tampa, Florida. We work globally, providing recruitment process outsourcing, executive search, contingent talent solutions, as well as talent consulting. And today I'm going to share a little bit about our survey strategy, starting with the challenges we faced and how we've leveraged OnSurvey to really drive real change within our survey activities. So, to start a little bit with what wasn't working, this is very similar to what Prabhu just shared. Our surveys were scattered. Some were in Workday, some were, I'll call it Workday adjacent, some were external in Microsoft Forms. And to be perfectly honest, some just weren't happening at all because we knew that it was just too complex to kind of put it in place to really get those fast, actionable results that we would want out of doing those surveys. In addition to that, aligning the survey data with Workday data as our foundational, both HR and Finn's data set was just a headache. We weren't able to tie it back. We were using VLOOKUPs. We were kind of pulling things in to pull them together. And it was just really a challenge to analyze the results that we were getting back in our survey. In addition, we had some challenges with kind of native Workday functionality with some of the questionnaires that I'll get into a little bit more specifics with some of the examples in terms of kind of how business processes flowed and how we needed that to work with our targeted audience as well. So, to give some specific examples of the surveys we've been able to look at, the first is candidate experience. This is actually something that we lost some functionality in moving from our previous ATS into Workday. When we implemented Workday recruiting, we were told by our implementation partner that to collect candidate feedback from any candidate who passed through interview, it would block the business process, and the recommendation was to go outside of the system. This, of course, creates those challenges we just talked about. Now it's a manual process for someone. Where is that data coming from? It's not connected to the candidate record within Workday. So when we first started talking to the Onward team about OnSurvey, we knew this was one of the first ones we would want to start using. And this is exactly it. It allows us to target that audience for all candidates that go through that interview stage based on their job application process. We're able to get that data connected to the candidate record right within Workday to ultimately be able to capture feedback about our recruiting process. It's really important to us to have an excellent candidate experience. It's what we do as a company. We want that to reflect with our own internal candidates so that we're able to address any adjustments that are needed right immediately as soon as we get that feedback. The next one is a new hire survey. This is something we've always done. We do it at 7, 45, and 90-day benchmarks after the employee hire date, and it had always been part of the onboarding process directly in Workday. That worked fine. Kind of thinking about those challenges, it was automated, it was in our process already, it was connected to Workday data as well. But looking at how OnSurvey this now is going to allow us to remove from the onboarding business process while still using the onboarding business process as basically that trigger. And what that will help us do is improve some of the pain points our HR operations team had in terms of having that as part of the business process, which then affected when they were using the onboarding status to follow up. It was showing as kind of onboarding was still pending, while the critical onboarding tasks were not. It was just this survey. In addition, the way that the OnSurvey app is built on the data model allows us to have more flexibility with the respondent business object, which allows us to target based on location, based on cost center, based on manager, based on job profile in a much easier and more flexible way. The last example I want to talk about is the pulse survey. Our next pulse survey we're planning on launching in OnSurvey. This helps us gauge employee sentiment across the organization. Previously, we were doing this in Microsoft Forms, and kind of like Prabhu said, we went with the approach of having people input their own information that we already have in our Workday foundational model. So they had to put their team, their job, their location. What we were finding is actually people were intentionally putting incorrect information in there that skewed our results. How did we know that? They would bring something up that was not relevant to their team or their region, um, which which inhibits our ability to act on the data. So with OnSurvey, we're switching from a anonymous survey to a confidential survey, and we have the confidence to do that because it's built on our Workday security model that we know and that we trust. So we know that that information that's coming back in is only accessible to the users that we want to have access to it, which in this case will be our HR team. This also allows us to, in the analysis of the information, we can then use our normal Workday tools, use our RAS reporting to drive directly to our Power BI tool, to analyze immediately as surveys come in. And as the responses come in, to be able to again filter by whatever our foundational data that we need in Workday, be that personal demographic data like gender, like generation, be that job data like job profile, cost center, specific managers, whatever it is, we have it. We have our model exactly how we want it. We can now see those results from there. So you can see that this really helps us not just collect this data, but really act on it. That is a core tenet of how we run surveys across our business. And this allows us to make those quick, actionable changes, whether that's in our recruitment process, our onboarding process, or our broader employee experience, and really help that feedback loop, help us build that feedback loop for those improvements on what our people really need. Looking ahead, we are looking at expanding this even more, supplier surveys as well outside of the HR world. Like I mentioned, we do use Workday Fins. We already have supplier surveys wrapped into our supplier onboarding, but one challenge has been our ongoing annual surveys for some of our ESG initiatives. Um, so this allows us to again target that audience based on supplier size and location, which is where our ESG goals are focused, to send that directly to the people we need it to. And another one that was an absent survey that we just weren't doing are targeted team level surveys. This is something we've talked about for a really long time and hadn't really been able to strategize and implement in a feasible way. And now OnSurvey will allow us to do that based on certain teams, certain managers, certain regions that we know need more targeted feedback for that more targeted action. So you can see that this really just allows for the flexibility for us to scale and adapt as our needs evolve. And we're really excited to partner with Onward to do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa, for the overview and the use cases. A couple of questions, right? Like, maybe we can zoom in on candidate experience or new hires. How are the survey responses planned to be used to improve a process? Like, do you do scoring? Do you do any type of, sentiment analysis? If you could give us insight into how does the survey response, are planned to be analyzed?
Absolutely, yeah. We use a mix of kind of quantitative and qualitative questions for both of them. Some of the quantitative ones help with our team SLAs for kind of certain satisfaction scores. And so then we can see those trends over time. We get a lot of our actions actually more so out of the qualitative, that the teams that run these processes do the analysis and see where there's targeted responses. They usually do it based on they kind of do weekly, monthly, quarterly trends to then be able to see where specific things are. For example, today I was just looking at a new hire survey response, and there's a group of workers that, well, here I'll give two examples. One was that there was a specific worker that was confused about the statutory time entry process for how they get paid for statutory holidays. And so then the HR team can reach out specifically to that person immediately. That's usually within the week-long analysis. So within 1 week of getting that response, they provide that back. In a month-long response, we saw that there was a specific team that from the recruitment process did not have clarity about, or kind of there was some confusion around what their job and roles and responsibilities were. And so then in kind of a month long analysis, after seeing several of these come in, then the team can target to help the people recruiting for that particular function be more clear about what is needed. Similarly, the metric scores can kind of see if we dip below our intended SLAs to kind of look at quality improvements in that area as well.
Exactly. Great. I think, measuring is a great step to understand the current and what is the end goal to improve the score. Excellent. Um, Second is, like, in terms of survey, what questions to ask is a important one, right? Maybe give us some insight on how do you go about defining the questions, like what sort of questions to ask in the survey.
Sure, absolutely. It really depends on what we're trying to action at the end of it. So, I kind of gave these examples of the new hire survey, so I'll stick with that. One of the things is that we're targeting is we have a specific population that is for a temporary workforce that is um, they're not at their computer, they're maybe a little less tech savvy, and our concern is that our Workday onboarding process might be too cumbersome for them. And so that's something that we ask specifically about that. How has your experience been with the Workday onboarding? So we know that we might have these kind of pain points and targeting those questions. We try to ask questions that we will specifically action on if we get certain answers, and vice versa as well. If we kind of have an inkling that something might be difficult, or there might be a challenge, or maybe there's a rumor that there is, and we want data to prove it, those are the types of questions we put in.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Melissa.